Every great transformation begins in one place, the mind. Nothing in your life will ever rise above the level of your thinking. Yet most people live as if their minds were on autopilot, reacting to circumstances instead of directing them. They hope for change, but hope alone is not power. Power lies in training the mind to think in a new and deliberate way, to think toward what you want instead of what you fear. The mind is the most extraordinary mechanism ever created. It will work tirelessly for you or tirelessly against you, depending on how you use it. Whatever you plant in it, it will grow. Feed it doubt, and it will produce confusion. Feed it fear, and it will generate excuses. But feed it vision, discipline, and belief, and it will create circumstances that seem miraculous. The mind is neutral soil. It does not care what you plant, but it is always faithful to what you sow. Most people never realize this law. They live in mental disorder, letting negative thoughts drift through their consciousness unchecked, as though thoughts had no consequence. But every thought has creative power. Every belief shapes perception, and perception determines behavior. If you want to change your world, you must first take charge of the world within. Training the mind begins with attention. You must become the guardian of your thoughts. Each morning, choose the direction of your thinking just as you would choose the clothes you wear. Ask yourself, what am I allowing to occupy my mind today? For the mind will always create from the material you give it. If you fill it with inspiration, purpose, and clarity, you will act with confidence and attract results of the same nature. Another part of training is repetition. You cannot think one good thought and expect a new life to appear. The mind learns through consistent direction. Write your goals, visualize them, repeat affirmations, and most importantly, feel gratitude for what you already possess. Gratitude shifts your awareness from lack to abundance, and that change of focus invites opportunity. Next comes discipline, the ability to think what you choose to think regardless of what happens around you. This is the real test. When difficulties arise, most people surrender mentally. They give their thoughts to fear and frustration. But the trained mind remains calm and creative. It looks at every challenge not as a wall, but as a doorway. The mind that is trained refuses to be a slave to emotion. It uses reason, purpose, and imagination to navigate through every storm. There is also the law of substitution. You cannot simply erase a negative thought. You must replace it. When doubt arises, replace it with faith in your vision. When fear whispers, replace it with action. The mind, like nature, abhors a vacuum. If you remove one pattern of thinking, you must install another immediately. Over time, these deliberate substitutions reshape the entire mental landscape. And then there is focus, the ability to hold a single idea long enough for it to mature. Most people scatter their thoughts. They change goals as quickly as they change moods. But success demands focus. When the mind learns to concentrate, energy increases and distractions lose their power. A focused mind becomes magnetic, drawing circumstances that align perfectly with its dominant purpose. Lastly, the trained mind never stops growing. It seeks new knowledge, studies success, and learns from every experience. Just as muscles strengthen with use, the mind expands through challenge and reflection. The more you refine it, the more life will reward you. For the outer world always mirrors the inner one. Change your mind. Truly train it, and you will watch everything else follow. The mind is the starting point of every achievement and the root of every failure. It is the control center of life, shaping every experience and determining how one interprets the world. To train the mind is to take command of destiny itself. Most people underestimate the power of their own thinking. They move through life reacting to what happens instead of creating what they want to happen. But nothing truly changes until a person learns how to use their mind with purpose and consistency. The quality of thoughts determines the quality of life. Just as a garden grows whatever seeds are planted in it, the mind produces results that match the nature of the ideas sound within it. When one fills the mind with fear, doubt, or limitation, the harvest is struggle, hesitation, and mediocrity. But when the same mind is filled with belief, clarity, and intention, life begins to align with those higher thoughts. Training the mind begins with awareness. It requires realizing that every single thought is a cause, and every condition is an effect. What appears to be coincidence is often the outcome of a long series of thoughts held persistently in the subconscious. The first step, therefore, is to become conscious of what one is thinking all day long. Observe the inner dialogue, the quiet words that repeat themselves without effort. Most people are not victims of circumstance. They are victims of untrained thought patterns. An untrained mind drifts like a ship without a rudder, tossed by the winds of environment and emotion. To take control, one must decide deliberately what to think about, and then hold that thought steadily. The mind cannot distinguish between what is real and what is imagined. Whatever the conscious mind accepts as true, the subconscious begins to work on. This is why visualization and affirmation are so powerful. When you consistently picture a goal as already accomplished, The subconscious moves in that direction automatically. It attracts ideas, opportunities, and situations that correspond to that image. It is not magic. It is law. The mind creates harmony between what it believes and what it experiences. If belief changes, experience must follow. But awareness alone is not enough. The mind must be trained through repetition. A single thought does not change much, just as one exercise does not build strength. It is the daily practice of focused thinking that transforms the inner world. Each morning offers a new chance to set the tone of the day. Before the rush of activity begins, sit quietly and direct the mind toward the outcomes you desire. Think of the person you want to be, the goals you want to achieve, and the qualities you wish to express. Let those ideas take root early, and they will influence every decision that follows. Guarding the mind is another essential part of training. Negative influences surround everyone in conversations, media, and even habitual moods. Each of these can plant seeds of doubt or discouragement if allowed to take hold. A trained mind does not accept every idea it encounters. It examines, filters, and discards what is not useful. Just as you would not eat spoiled food, do not consume spoiled thoughts. The moment you feel fear or resentment rising, replace it with faith and gratitude. The act of substitution is a powerful tool. You cannot simply stop thinking negatively. You must replace those thoughts with something better. Discipline is the bridge between awareness and mastery. There will be times when the mind resists direction, when old patterns fight to return. This is where willpower must be applied. Every time you choose a positive thought over a negative one, you strengthen your mental control. Every time you maintain calm under stress, you train your mind to obey rather than dominate. Over time, this discipline becomes automatic. The mind begins to follow your chosen direction naturally without constant effort. Focus is another skill developed through training. The untrained mind jumps from one idea to another, never holding a thought long enough to produce results. Concentration gathers energy. When the mind focuses on a single purpose, its power multiplies. This is why clarity of goal is so important. You cannot train the mind effectively if you are uncertain of what you want. Decide clearly, visualize vividly, and hold that picture unwaveringly. The universe responds to certainty. A focused mind becomes magnetic. It draws to itself the people and events needed for its realization. Growth is the final element of mental training. The mind expands when it is challenged, just as muscles grow stronger through resistance. Reading, reflection, and learning are all forms of exercise for the intellect. But true growth happens when knowledge becomes applied understanding. When you begin to connect your thoughts, actions, and results, you develop wisdom. The trained mind seeks progress, not perfection. It knows that every experience, pleasant or painful, contributes to mastery if interpreted correctly. To train the mind like this is to move from unconscious living to deliberate creation. It is to awaken from mental sleep and realize that you are not your thoughts. You are the thinker who chooses them. You can build any reality when you discipline the inner world to support the outer goal. The trained mind no longer reacts blindly to circumstances, but creates them through clarity, repetition, and faith in the unseen process that connects thought and manifestation. The mind is not a passive observer of life. It is the architect that designs it. Whatever thoughts are repeated most often, whatever ideas are allowed to dominate, shape every action, every mood, and every outcome. To train the mind means to take responsibility for what it produces. Most people never do. They drift through their days letting random impressions and external conditions write the script of their existence. They think according to what they see, and because they only see what they think about, they remain locked in a circle of sameness. The trained mind, however, reverses the process. It starts with thought, not circumstance. It holds an inner picture so clearly that life must eventually conform to it. It does not react to what is, but responds according to what will be. There is no mystery behind this. The mind works by law, not by chance. Every belief held with conviction becomes a command to the subconscious, which then influences behavior, perception, and attraction. If a person believes they are limited, they will act cautiously, perceive obstacles, and attract situations that confirm that belief. If another believes that possibilities are endless, they will act boldly, see opportunity in every challenge, and naturally magnetize favorable results. The difference between the two is not luck, intelligence, or background. It is the pattern of thought that dominates the mind. To train the mind, one must first understand its dual nature. The conscious mind is the gatekeeper. It chooses what ideas are admitted. The subconscious mind is the worker. It accepts whatever is given to it and acts upon it without question. Most people neglect their gatekeeper. They let fears, criticisms, and limiting beliefs slip through unnoticed, and the subconscious accepts them as truth. Training begins when you become alert enough to guard that gate deliberately. Every time a negative or unproductive thought arises, it must be challenged. The question should always be, does this thought serve the life I want to create? If it does not, it has no place within. Mental discipline requires practice. It is not achieved by reading about it or wishing for it. It is built through small, daily acts of self-awareness. When you notice yourself complaining, worrying, or doubting, stop immediately and redirect the mind to something constructive. Replace the problem with the image of its solution. Replace the fear with the vision of courage. Replace lack with gratitude for what already exists. The act of substitution transforms energy. The more consistently it is practiced, the more the mind becomes conditioned to think creatively instead of destructively. Visualization is one of the most powerful exercises for mental training. The mind thinks in images, not words. When you see clearly in your imagination the person you want to be and the conditions you wish to experience, the subconscious accepts that picture as reality. It begins working quietly and persistently to align your outer world with the inner vision. The key is emotional involvement. Feel the scene as though it were already true. Feel the satisfaction, the peace, the gratitude. Emotion fuels imagination and gives the image power. Without feeling, visualization is only daydreaming. With feeling, it becomes creation. Repetition is the next vital principle. You cannot think a new thought once and expect transformation. The mind changes by habit. Just as water shapes stone through constant flow, repeated ideas carve new patterns in consciousness. This is why affirmations, written goals, and consistent reminders are so effective. They keep the mind centered on the desired direction until the new pattern becomes automatic. At that point, effort gives way to natural expression. The thought becomes part of your identity, and your actions begin to reflect it instinctively. Focus determines strength. A scattered mind cannot produce lasting results. To train the mind is to bring its energy into alignment around one purpose. Choose a goal that excites you, something worthy of your full attention, and pour your mental energy into it daily. Think of it while you walk, while you work, and while you rest. Let it occupy your imagination so deeply that it becomes part of your inner dialogue. When the mind is filled with a single dominant purpose, distractions lose their power. People who achieve extraordinary success are not those who work harder than others. They are those whose minds remain focused longer on what they desire. Faith is the invisible foundation of all mental training. You must believe that your thoughts matter, that they have power, and that life responds to them. Without faith, discipline becomes strain and visualization becomes fantasy. Faith transforms these practices into creative acts. It assures you that even when nothing appears to be changing, something is shifting beneath the surface. The trained mind does not demand immediate evidence. It moves confidently, knowing that every thought is a seed that must eventually bear fruit. A quiet mind is also a trained mind. Constant mental noise weakens concentration. Take time each day to be still, to silence the restless chatter of unnecessary thinking. In stillness, clarity emerges. You begin to hear the quiet guidance that intuition provides. This inner guidance is never loud or dramatic. It is calm, certain, and precise. The more you practice quieting the mind, the stronger this inner voice becomes. It will lead you toward right decisions and protect you from impulsive ones. To train the mind like this is to rise above habit and reaction, to live from deliberate creation instead of circumstance. It is a process of aligning thought, emotion, and action with the vision of what you wish to become. The mind, when properly trained, becomes a servant of purpose rather than a master of confusion. Everything external begins to adjust to the new inner order because the outer world always mirrors the inner one. Every person is born with a mind capable of extraordinary power, but few ever discover its true potential because they never learn how to use it consciously. The difference between success and failure, peace and confusion, fulfillment and frustration lies entirely in the way the mind is directed. The mind is not a simple organ of thought. It is a creative force that shapes everything a person experiences. Whatever is held in the mind, whether positive or negative, eventually expresses itself in reality. The mind does not argue, it accepts. It does not judge, it obeys. It produces results that correspond exactly to the nature of the thoughts that dominate it. Most people, unaware of this law, let their minds become cluttered with worries, doubts, and fears. They think about what they don't want and wonder why it continues to appear. They entertain the same discouraging thoughts day after day, not realizing that each thought is an instruction to the subconscious to create more of the same. The mind, like fertile soil, does not distinguish between seeds of flowers or weeds. It grows whatever is planted. That is why mental discipline is not optional. It is essential. If a person does not take charge of their thinking, life will be directed by randomness, circumstance, and the influence of others. Training the mind begins with understanding attention. Whatever one continually gives attention to grows stronger in life. If you constantly think about problems, those problems expand. If you focus instead on purpose, solutions, and growth, those things begin to dominate. The human mind can only hold one major thought at a time, and that thought will color perception. When you focus on fear, you see reasons to retreat. When you focus on opportunity, you see reasons to move forward. What changes is not the world, but the way you interpret it. Every change in perception begins with a deliberate shift in attention. A trained mind does not drift. It chooses its thoughts as carefully as a sculptor chooses each stroke. This requires constant self-observation. Notice what you are thinking at any given moment. Notice the emotional tone attached to that thought. If it weakens you, replace it. If it strengthens you, nurture it. The more you practice this, the more control you gain over your inner world. At first, this effort feels unnatural because the untrained mind is restless and impulsive. But with persistence, awareness becomes habit and calm direction replaces mental chaos. Another principle of training lies in emotional management. Thoughts and emotions are not separate forces, they feed each other. A negative emotion is often the result of a negative interpretation. Change the interpretation, and the emotion changes too. The trained mind does not suppress emotion, it understands it. When anger, fear, or doubt arise, it asks what belief is producing this feeling. By addressing the belief instead of the emotion, you regain control. The mind becomes steady, and decisions become rational rather than reactive. Visualization is one of the most effective ways to train this inner faculty. The mind responds vividly to images, and whatever image is impressed upon it repeatedly becomes a blueprint for reality. Picture yourself as you wish to be. See the conditions you desire as though they already exist. This practice is not escapism, it is rehearsal. Every great achievement begins as a clear mental picture held with faith and emotion. The more frequently you visualize with conviction, the more natural it becomes for your subconscious to bring those conditions into being. Gratitude is another form of training that transforms the mental state. It shifts attention away from what is missing to what is already abundant. The moment you express genuine gratitude, you align your mind with prosperity rather than lack. This alignment changes the quality of your thoughts, and because your outer world is a reflection of your inner state, circumstances begin to mirror that abundance. Gratitude is not merely a reaction to good things, it is the cause of them. The law of repetition governs mental development just as it governs physical development. You cannot lift a weight once and expect strength. You cannot think one constructive thought and expect transformation. The mind learns through consistency. Every time you affirm a positive idea, visualize success, or redirect a negative thought, you strengthen new neural pathways. Over time, those new pathways become dominant, and the old habits fade naturally. The process is gradual but certain. The secret is persistence. The results appear when the new mental pattern becomes stronger than the old one. Discipline is the mark of true mental mastery. It means maintaining a chosen direction of thought regardless of outer conditions. It means refusing to let external noise decide internal focus. Discipline is not rigidity, it is commitment. When challenges appear, the disciplined mind looks for lessons instead of losses. It does not surrender to emotion, it observes, understands, and adjusts. This steadiness becomes power. When the mind is trained to remain calm in the face of chaos, it becomes impossible to be defeated by circumstance. The trained mind is also a creative mind. It uses imagination not for escape but for design. Every invention, every work of art, every discovery was first a thought in someone's imagination. The same principle applies to personal growth. The life you desire must first exist as a vivid image in your imagination before it can take form in reality. By nurturing that image with faith, repetition, and action, you bridge the gap between the invisible and the visible. To train the mind like this is to live consciously. It is to stop being a product of environment and become the creator of it. It is to realize that everything in the external world begins as a silent thought in the internal one. When you discipline thought, you discipline life. When you master attention, emotion, and imagination, the mind ceases to be a wandering force and becomes the most powerful servant you possess. The mind, when left untrained, becomes a restless servant of circumstance. It reacts, it resists, it repeats. But when disciplined and directed, it becomes the most faithful ally a person could ever possess. Every habit, every attitude, and every result in life begins as a single repeated thought. To train the mind, then, is to reshape the future from its source. Most people attempt to change their conditions without ever changing their thinking, but the outer world is only a reflection of the inner one. A person who learns to master their thoughts begins to master everything else, because thought is the foundation of all creation. Training the mind is not an occasional act, it is a continuous practice. Just as the body requires daily nourishment and exercise, so too does the mind demand consistent attention. The quality of what we feed it determines the quality of what it produces. Every conversation, every book, every image that enters consciousness becomes part of the mental environment. A mind fed with negativity cannot produce peace or success. A mind nourished with inspiration and clear intention cannot produce anything but growth. This is why mental diet is as important as physical diet. You become what you habitually think, and what you habitually think is shaped by what you habitually expose yourself to. The first step in training the mind is awareness. You must begin to notice the tone of your thoughts. Are they rooted in fear or in faith? Are they focused on limitation or on possibility? Most people live with an internal dialogue that works silently against them. They repeat phrases of doubt, worry, and defeat until those phrases become part of their identity. Awareness interrupts that cycle. The moment you become conscious of a negative thought, you have already separated yourself from it. You are no longer the thought. You are the observer of it. And what you can observe, you can change. The next step is direction. The mind, like a compass, needs a clear point to aim toward. If you do not choose the direction of your thinking, circumstances will choose it for you. Decide what you want, and let that decision become the center of your focus. When the mind has a definite purpose, it begins to organize itself around that purpose. Random thoughts lose power, distractions fade, and clarity sharpens. The mind craves instruction, and the more specific the instruction, the more efficiently it performs. A person without direction is pulled by every external influence, but one who trains their mind to hold a goal firmly becomes steady in a world of movement. Another key element is repetition. You cannot replace years of habitual thinking with a single burst of inspiration. Thought patterns are grooves worn deep through continual use, and new grooves must be carved the same way, through practice and persistence. This is why affirmations and visualization are powerful. When you repeat a positive idea with emotion and belief, the subconscious accepts it as truth. The repetition becomes habit, and habit becomes nature. Each time you affirm your ability, your vision, your peace, you reinforce the structure of that reality in the unseen world of mind. Eventually, it expresses itself in the seen world of form. Emotional control is also part of mental training. The untrained mind allows emotions to dictate thought. The trained mind allows thought to guide emotion. When challenges appear, the natural impulse is to react with frustration or fear. But the trained mind pauses, observes, and asks what can be learned or created from the situation. This moment of pause is where power lies. It transforms reaction into response. The ability to think clearly when others panic, to remain centered when others lose control, is one of the greatest advantages a trained mind provides. The practice of stillness strengthens this control. In quiet reflection or meditation, the surface noise of thought begins to settle, and a deeper intelligence emerges. The mind becomes a mirror rather than a storm. In this state, you gain insight and clarity that hurried thinking cannot provide. Stillness does not mean idleness. It means concentration without tension. It is in stillness that you discover the subtle guidance that often leads to breakthrough ideas and right decisions. The more time you spend in this state, the more naturally calm and decisive you become in daily life. Another part of mental training involves focus. The average mind jumps constantly between past and future, scattering its power across countless fragments of attention. But when you bring all awareness to a single task, the mind becomes a laser, precise, efficient, and unstoppable. Focus transforms ordinary effort into extraordinary achievement. You begin to notice opportunities that others overlook simply because your attention is concentrated. The mind gathers energy when directed, and that energy turns thought into form faster than scattered intention ever could. The mind also responds to environment. Just as a plant thrives or withers depending on the soil it grows in, the mind flourishes when surrounded by uplifting influences. Choose carefully the company you keep, the conversations you engage in, and the information you absorb. Everything around you either strengthens or weakens your mental discipline. Protect your peace as you would protect your most valuable possession. The trained mind understands that it is responsible for its atmosphere, and it creates one that supports clarity and progress. Growth happens through challenge. The untrained mind avoids discomfort, but the trained mind understands that resistance is the gymnasium of growth. Each difficulty faced consciously strengthens mental endurance. The more you confront fear with thought and purpose, the weaker fear becomes. Over time, the mind no longer perceives obstacles as threats but as opportunities to expand awareness. This shift marks the difference between living reactively and living creatively. When the mind is trained through awareness, repetition, focus, stillness, and challenge, it begins to align with higher order. Thoughts become deliberate, emotions become balanced, and actions become purposeful. The world outside starts to respond differently because the world inside has changed its vibration. The trained mind no longer seeks control over others or circumstances. It simply maintains control over itself, and in doing so, it becomes the quiet force behind every meaningful transformation. Every life moves in the direction of its dominant thoughts. Whatever occupies the mind most of the time shapes behavior, habits, and destiny. The mind cannot hold one idea and produce another result. It always expresses itself in exact harmony with what it continually believes to be true. This is why mental training is not a luxury but a necessity. The untrained mind drifts into confusion, reacting to every condition as though powerless, while the trained mind moves with clarity, guiding itself through all circumstances with calm authority. Training the mind means learning how to think consciously instead of mechanically, how to direct thought rather than be directed by it. The first step toward this mastery is recognition. You must recognize that the mind is always working, always creating, always forming impressions that turn into experience. Every emotion, every word, every reaction is the result of something that first took place in thought. Most people live from the outside in. They allow events, people, and conditions to dictate how they think and feel. But true transformation happens when one begins to live from the inside out. When you understand that thoughts precede circumstances, you begin to see that you are never a victim of what happens. You are a participant in creating it. The power lies in taking responsibility for the contents of your own mind. Awareness leads naturally to discipline. The moment you realize that every thought is a seed, you become more careful about what you plant. You start to examine habitual patterns, to notice the tone of your inner dialogue. Many people sabotage themselves with silent repetition of failure-based thinking. They tell themselves they can't, that it's too late, that they lack what others have. The subconscious listens to these words and obeys them faithfully. The trained mind, however, replaces these destructive patterns with constructive affirmations. It speaks of possibility, progress, and patience. It builds belief through repetition until that belief becomes the new default setting. Discipline also means holding your focus in one direction long enough for results to appear. The mind grows restless when it does not see immediate proof, but this restlessness must be resisted. Thought takes time to crystallize into form. When you train the mind to remain steady despite outer appearances, you develop the kind of mental endurance that separates success from frustration. Every idea needs persistence to take root, and persistence is the child of disciplined thought. A person who can think calmly and persistently on a single goal is already halfway to its realization. Visualization strengthens this process. The mind responds vividly to imagery. When you see yourself already in possession of the thing you desire, when you imagine with full sensory detail and emotional conviction, the subconscious accepts that image is real and begins to act upon it. The outer world starts to rearrange itself to match the inner picture. This is not superstition. It is the natural operation of mental law. The subconscious does not distinguish between reality and imagination. It simply executes the strongest impressions it receives. The more vivid and consistent the image, the faster the alignment occurs. Faith amplifies every mental effort. Without faith, training becomes mechanical, and mechanical thought produces mechanical results. Faith is the conviction that unseen forces are already at work responding to your dominant idea. It is quiet confidence rather than desperate hope. It allows the mind to rest in assurance even when no visible evidence exists. The trained mind does not beg for results. It expects them with calm certainty. Faith transforms repetition into power and patience into progress. It keeps the inner world stable while the outer world adjusts itself to new patterns of thought. Gratitude refines faith by keeping attention on abundance rather than lack. Every moment spent in genuine gratitude strengthens the feeling of already having, which magnetizes more of the same. Gratitude neutralizes fear, envy, and resentment, the mental poisons that block progress. It also trains the mind to find good in every situation, which is the essence of wisdom. When the mind becomes accustomed to appreciation, even adversity is seen as instruction. This attitude creates mental resilience, allowing a person to remain balanced and creative under pressure. Focus is another essential part of training. The average person scatters thought energy across countless small worries and trivial desires, weakening its effect. A focused mind, however, directs all its energy toward a definite purpose. It does not waste power on distraction or comparison. It knows what it wants, why it wants it, and keeps that vision before it constantly. Concentrated attention is the channel through which ideas pass into achievement. When the mind is concentrated, action becomes efficient, decisions become clear, and opportunities appear that once went unnoticed. Emotional mastery deepens the training further. Thoughts are most powerful when aligned with calm emotion. A mind that panics or doubts loses control over its creative ability. Emotional stability is not the absence of feeling but the balance of it. It means thinking clearly even when circumstances are uncertain, responding rather than reacting, and allowing reason to guide emotion instead of the other way around. When the mind is calm, it can see possibilities that fear hides. When it is confident, it turns obstacles into raw material for growth. The final level of training comes through reflection. Each day offers lessons in how the mind operates. By reviewing your thoughts and reactions, you learn where attention was wasted and where it was wisely invested. Reflection sharpens awareness and prevents the mind from falling back into unconscious habits. The goal is not perfection but progress, a gradual refinement of thinking that leads to greater harmony, creativity, and control. When the mind is trained in awareness, discipline, visualization, faith, gratitude, focus, and reflection, it becomes the architect of experience rather than the product of it. It no longer drifts between fear and desire, but moves steadily in the direction of intention. The trained mind knows that everything begins within, and by mastering the inner world, one gains quiet command over the outer one. The greatest transformations begin silently in the mind. Everything visible in life is first born from thought, and everything that endures begins as an idea sustained by belief. Yet most people give little attention to how their minds function. They move through their days ruled by habit, emotion, and circumstance, unaware that they are creating their own experience moment by moment. The trained mind understands that every event, every condition, every relationship is the result of an inner cause. To change life, you must change the way you think, and to change the way you think, you must train your mind to obey your deliberate direction instead of drifting on its own. Training the mind is an art and a science. It requires both understanding and application. Understanding reveals the principles by which thought becomes reality. Application proves them through experience. The untrained mind reacts to every external trigger, swinging between hope and fear. It lives by default rather than by design. But the trained mind becomes still, focused, and intentional. It learns to observe without immediate judgment, to think without confusion, and to decide without hesitation. It moves from reaction to creation, from chaos to clarity. The first discipline of mental training is control of attention. Whatever you give sustained attention to, you feed with energy, and what you feed grows stronger. Most people scatter their attention across endless distractions, feeding what they do not want. They focus on what's wrong, what's missing, or what's uncertain, and by doing so, they multiply those conditions. The trained mind withdraws its attention from everything that weakens it and directs it toward what strengthens and uplifts. It thinks in terms of solutions instead of problems, possibilities instead of limitations. When attention becomes controlled, thought becomes creative, and energy becomes concentrated. Control of thought also involves choice. You cannot stop thoughts from arising, but you can choose which ones to entertain. The mind is like a busy marketplace where countless ideas call for attention. Most people purchase whatever is loudest. But the wise thinker selects carefully, allowing only those ideas that serve purpose and peace. This act of choosing becomes a filter through which all future experiences pass. The more selective you become, the more orderly your inner world grows, and the outer world begins to mirror that order. Another aspect of training is consistency. The mind does not change through occasional effort, but through steady repetition. Every day offers new opportunities to reinforce positive patterns and weaken negative ones. Each moment of awareness, each act of self-correction strengthens mental control. The process is gradual but certain. Over time, the mind begins to obey the will naturally, responding like a trained instrument. The thoughts that once ruled you become servants of your intention. This constancy builds a quiet confidence that no external condition can shake. Imagination plays a central role in mental mastery. Whatever you imagine vividly and repeatedly becomes impressed upon the subconscious, and the subconscious expresses it through action, attraction, and intuition. Visualization is not fantasy. It is mental rehearsal. When you imagine success, peace, or abundance with genuine feeling, the subconscious begins aligning behavior and perception to bring that image into reality. The clearer and more emotional the image, the faster it manifests. Imagination, guided by purpose, becomes the blueprint from which your future is built. Emotion gives thought its creative force. Thought alone is structure. Emotion gives it life. But emotion must be directed. Uncontrolled emotion drains energy, clouds judgment, and weakens focus. Controlled emotion, guided by reason and faith, becomes power. The trained mind learns to feel deeply without being carried away. It allows emotion to motivate, not manipulate. It channels passion into productive action and transforms desire into discipline. The balance of thought and feeling creates inner harmony, and from that harmony flows strength. Faith is the unseen current that carries all mental effort toward its realization. To train the mind, you must believe that thought matters, that unseen laws are working in your favor, and that consistency will bring results even when appearances suggest otherwise. Doubt interrupts the process, but faith sustains it. Faith is calm, steady, and quiet. It does not demand proof because it knows that cause always precedes effect. The trained mind holds faith as a constant companion, using it to steady the heart when outcomes are delayed. Gratitude reinforces faith by reminding the mind of abundance already present. It turns attention away from what is lacking toward what is working, and this shift in focus multiplies blessings. A grateful mind is never weak or anxious because it sees every experience as part of growth. It extracts wisdom from difficulty and opportunity from delay. Gratitude changes perception, and perception determines reality. When you train your mind to see good in everything, life begins to deliver more good to see. Stillness is the final discipline of a trained mind. In stillness, the endless noise of thought begins to settle, and the deeper intelligence of intuition becomes audible. This quiet knowing is never loud or emotional. It is clear, calm, and sure. It speaks in simple direction rather than argument. To hear it, one must learn to quiet the surface mind through meditation, reflection, or silence. The more often you enter this stillness, the more easily you can return to it amid daily activity. A mind that can be still at will possesses unshakable power. The trained mind does not eliminate, challenge, or control every event, but it transforms the way those events are experienced. It interprets difficulty as instruction and success as responsibility. It no longer seeks constant approval or fears temporary loss because it understands that all experience originates in thought. To train the mind is to reclaim authority over life, to awaken from unconscious reaction and live with deliberate awareness. The more you practice this inner discipline, the more naturally your thoughts, emotions, and actions move together in harmony with purpose.